Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who is dedicated to helping sports teams navigate the ever-evolving digital landscape, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. I'm Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 352 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I catch up with Dean Bosnich. He's the General Manager of Game Development at the National Rugby League here in Australia. Thank you very much for joining me on this episode. I am always trying to help people navigate the ever-evolving digital landscape, new platforms crashing, that's what we do. You can always reach out to me via email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. You can find me on socials at Sean Callanan at Sports Geek on most platforms, and you can all find everything related to Sports Geek, all the episodes, and also how you can work with us at sportsgeekhq.com. Don't forget, you can contact me at any time for a digital audit review, a brainstorming session with your team if you're feeling a little bit stuck in what you're doing from a content point of view, or you're having some issues and friction with your commercial team or trying to get those outcomes. That's sort of where we work well. I do like it when I had a listener call me a digital Navy SEAL. I really do embrace that, jump into situations and help solve some problems in the digital world. So if you would like that, reach out, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Let's get stuck into it. This is my chat with Dean Bosnich from the NRL. Very happy to welcome Dean Bosnich. He's the General Manager of Game Development at the NRL. Dean, welcome to the podcast.
Great, Sean. It's great to be here, mate. Thank you.
No problems. As I normally do, I sort of always want to find out how people got their start in sports. How did you get your start in the sports business?
Probably like a lot of people as a participant, really. When I started, so we've got a big history with the game, my family in general. So I got brought up as which a lot of people won't like in the rugby league world. I got brought up as a Manly fan by my family, and so I just grew just to love the game through family, and then started playing it obviously as a really young kid on the northern beaches in Sydney for a club called Chroma Kingfishers. And just grew from there, lifelong then association with the sport, went through all grades of football at Manly, through all the pathways system. Was lucky enough to then go to the Cronulla Sharks and play a few years of NRL footy there, and then eventually ended up in France, playing and coaching over in France. Then full circle back to Australia to start to work back in coaching initially, and then game development. But when I was really young, playing in the pathways system at Manly, I actually assisted the game development officers there. So it's a bit of a full circle journey. I always had game development in the background as an experience when I was a young kid as a trainee, and did a thing they had those days called actually a diploma in rugby league, believe it or not.
Okay.
There was a diploma in rugby league for people to do that as they were going through the pathway system if you wanted to work with coaching and kids and development in the future. So I did that, and then came back full circle after the playing journey and a little bit of coaching.
And so was that sort of like a pathway that, you know, you were sort of experienced the pathway going through as a kid and through all the leagues and then professionally, but then seeing that game development? You obviously dabbled in coaching and played overseas and coached overseas. Was it something that you were, you know, passionate about the game? Again, like a lot of us don't get a choice in the sport and the teams you follow, but you then got that love, but then was something that, you know, helping develop the game and game development was something you were thinking, because you're sort of in that, a lot of athletes have that fork in the road. Do I head down the path of coaching, high performance, that side, and then the other side, which is more game admin and game development?
You're spot on, 100% right. So as soon as I came out of my professional playing career, I coached in France for the last couple of years I was there. Came back and started coaching at what you'd call a semi-professional level in Australia initially, and that's the path I initially wanted to go down, very much down the performance coaching pathway, but I still always had that background of working with the real grassroots level of the sport, like the kids in schools, the kids in school competitions, promoting the sport to new people. I always had that, and then just through circumstance, I linked back with a few people. I was actually coaching in Queensland at the time, and I linked up with some NRL people and started working in game development again. And that's when the fork in the road came, like you say exactly. It was, do I go down this road, which is really working with the grassroots level of the sport, or do I try and push through in the performance area? And I think, in all honesty, my heart just got dragged over to the grassroots side of the sport. And I felt like I could have a bigger positive effect on the sport in general going down that road. I mean, when you go down the coaching road, you can obviously highly influence your club and the people around you, but your influence on the entire sport is quite limited. So that's what appealed to me. Like the sport's given me everything in life, so giving back to it is a big driver of me still to this day, to help give people the opportunities that I got given.
So you've been quite lucky in working in different parts of the heartland of the NRL. For those listeners in Australia, National Rugby League, dominates things in Queensland and New South Wales, and you've sort of been in different roles in that regional game development, both in Queensland and in New South Wales. And was that really one where you like you talk about grassroots, but really getting to the coalface, getting to the clubs, and understanding some of their pain points?
Oh, 100%. Look, there's grassroots and there's grassroots, right? Like, so to some people, grassroots may be, the levels or the tiers that are under professionalism. But true grassroots in our sport is the local clubs and competitions in junior footy competitions all around the country, metro and regional areas. I worked a lot in southwest Queensland originally, around the Toowoomba region, and then even much further west. We used to go out to some really remote and regional areas on various sort of road shows where I remember one that really stuck in my mind early on. We did a belt in a day where we went through about 4 or 5 school visits. And one school had 7 kids in the entire school, and 3 of those kids were siblings. So literally those sort of experiences are that's grassroots.
Yep.
That's the true grassroots of the sport, and getting to those kids and giving them an experience that they don't usually get offered. And, a lot of sports in our country do a great job trying to give kids those opportunities. But what I'm really proud of is with the NRL is we do, in our game development arm and our community arms, we do get out to some really remote areas that don't get many experiences. So that's that. Once you experience things like that, it's very hard to go away from it. It's such a rewarding thing to see, and then to now know that I can play a role in sort of influencing those experiences around the whole country, what it looks like and what we do. That's the really appealing thing to me.
So now in your role, you really, you've gone from the grassroots to have that 30,000 foot view of here's what we need to do. And you have a lot of great people, at the grassroots implementing things, but you really do need, a strategy and a North Star to sort of point people to. What's some of the work that's been done to say, hey, here's the strategy for the NRL, here's what we want to do, here's what we want to see in 5, 10, 25 years? What kind of work have you done to sort of set that forward planning?
Yeah, we are really looking a long way down the track too with the NRL. We've come a long way, and I've been with the NRL myself for nearly 10 years, but even in that time, we've come a very long way. We've modernised a hell of a lot in our approach to grassroots participation, and there's plenty of barriers out there. And in a pure, simple terms, our strategy is rooted in removing the barriers to participation and making the sport as open and inclusive as possible. And we go way beyond the traditional tackle part of the sport. We have a partnership with Touch Football, which is part of we have a touch, tag, tackle suite of offerings. And that goes across school programs, school competitions, gala days, clubs, all the way through to them once that starts to sort of merge into the aspirational levels of the sport and ultimately then into pathways. But at a really broad view, we try and remove the barriers to participate in our sport. We make it as fun as possible. Like all of our intro programs to new kids are non-contact and just teaching them the fundamentals and the fun parts of the game. But the strategy is ultimately rooted in a thing called the player development framework that the NRL has developed, which we can talk about as much length as you'd like. It's a long-term project, but we're starting to see the fruits of it now as it is essentially almost fully implemented across the country now in all the concepts. Huge changes in the sport, and like with anything, when there's changes, there was people worried about it, scared about it, questioning it, was it the right direction of the sport? But we're seeing some great results everywhere we've rolled it out. It's a very modern approach. And essentially, then my job is taking those concepts and working out how we integrate it in our delivery workforce. So all the game development officers, as they're called across the country, ultimately sit under me. So we're the biggest part of the NRL. Not many people realise that. We're about a third of the entire NRL, and we're everywhere around the country. We have offices placed everywhere around the country, both in the metro centres and the regional hubs and everywhere. So it's a big workforce. It's a big job, and the main parts of it are developing that strategy of how we're going to actually implement this stuff and deliver it to people across the country. And then there's always that ongoing just evaluation and review and strategy in the background, and what do we need to change and update. So there's a huge people part of what I do, managing them, but there's also the strategic area, which is what really interests me as well.
It is a very unique Australian thing to have a league that is the professional top tier, that is the thing that brings in the big bucks, the TV deals, that levels up into state of origin, but then also, you're also managing and the participation piece. It's, if you look at the NBL and Basketball Australia, they're two separate entities doing things, whereas, for the NRL, you've got to make sure that there is still talent coming through for that top tier, but then also, making, like you said, the game accessible to everyone. So, for your hat, you are trying to provide the next stars that will be playing NRL, either in the men or the women's comp, but then also making sure that club network and everything is healthy and vibrant and has, the things you need from a participation point of view, like coaches and volunteers and referees and those kind of things. All of that all of those problems are all on your desk.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. So we often use the analogy of a pyramid, right? Like, so the broader the base of the pyramid, the higher the pinnacle is going to be. So that's sort of our job, and we tend to not really focus on the elite parts of the sport, because I feel it's really a healthy way to operate where we're integrated. We know what each other's strategies are, and we know where the elite level's going, and we've got an eye on that because that affects the structures we've got to have down at the ground. But we need people who are solely dedicated to the participation level of the sport and don't get dazzled by the bright lights, because if you do, that's where you're going to spend your time. It's very attractive over there, and it's exciting, and it's all high energy, and it's all glitz and glamour. But we need a workforce of people who just cares about the grassroots of the sport. So and the health of that, because without that we have nothing. We don't have the players of the future. We don't have the fans of the future. We don't have the people who want to consume the game, and we want to connect people to the sport for life too. That's our other sort of big driver. It's not about just getting kids to play the game now. They might choose to stop playing the game at whatever stage of their life, and that's fine. But we still want them to be part of the game as a volunteer, as a fan, as a member, as a subscriber to TV, to Foxtel, to KO, to all those things. So the game keeps rolling forward, and we're looking for that generational connection to a game. And that's what my family had. Like, grandparents loved it, produced kids that loved it. And there's that lifetime connection with the game. And that's what we're ultimately trying to achieve. So the game's sustainable, really, as well, and it continues to grow and thrive.
And I think everyone that I've spoken to that is in that participation space, like all the studies say, you're playing a sport at 8, 9, 10, you become embedded and you love the sport for life. It must be, looking back at your early career, it was, hey, here's the one brand of football that's available for you. And here's how you go play. You go play at a junior club, and that's the kind. Having far more, it gets a bit technical, far more product, right? So many different types of versions of your game available across tackle and different versions. It must really, one, open up, make that base wider, like you said, be more inclusive, being open to both boys and girls. Again, 15 years ago, all of these things weren't available. It must be pretty exciting to be in that role where, new ideas and change sometimes hard, but then also seeing what are the opportunities arise from some of those changes.
Oh yeah, you're right. It's really exciting. It's an exciting time, I think, in just sport around the world. Like there are challenges, but the female growth of all sports is amazing, and it opens a whole another avenue in itself. And it's not really well publicised by the NRL, but we've got a lot of pioneering parts of the female game, really, where there was a lot of female participation happening in our sport before anyone really knew about it or before it was really a thing. So we've led the way in a lot of those areas, and our approach to especially female participation has been very much a ground-up approach. We didn't decide to go in as, let's get an elite level first and try and work out the rest later. We've chosen to organically let it develop, starting with, again, the grassroots of the sport, which we have really strong participation across tackle, tag, touch, all of that in the female area of the game. But it's just exciting because there's so many more opportunities. And with that, that again creates a whole nother lot of opportunities for even male parts of the sport, inclusiveness parts of the sport, all abilities, wheelchair rugby league, like all these amazing things that happen now that all complement each other and all drive further, participation in the sport. It's really exciting. And the possibilities are sort of endless. It's great. Like we used to be very pigeonholed. It's like there was tackle and there was males and that was pretty much it. And now it truly is an inclusive game for everyone. And most sports are, and the ones that aren't are moving in that direction. So it's exciting. It's a good time to be involved in any type of sport. But with ours, with a lot of the stuff that's going on at the moment, there's some exciting things. There's expansion. There's games in Las Vegas. There's a lot of exciting things to look at in the sport. And then hopefully that creates bigger exposure and opportunities for us to do a lot more, and resources at the end of the day for us to do a lot more at the grassroots level, which is one of the great things about the NRL. Like you mentioned before, it's a top-down model, and a lot of money and resourcing does go down to the ground. It's probably not obvious for the average person to see where that goes, but just the fact, even like I mentioned before, that a third of the NRL workforce is dedicated to serving volunteers and community and schools, like that shows, that's a big indication of what the NRL sort of invests into the grassroots of the sport.
And I did have a question, you sort of mentioned sort of outside Australia, because obviously the NRL is played in Australia and New Zealand, but then the player base, there's a strong player base that comes from across the Pacific Islands and different parts of Australia. Is that also part of your remit to sort of help the game develop in different regions and like help identify talent, but then also, make it a sport that they can play?
Yeah, it's becoming, that's growing again. We've had a workforce in the Pacific for quite a while. So we have people in New Guinea, Fiji, Tonga, Samoa. New Zealand Rugby League handles this part of the sport over there. Mm-hmm. We work alongside them. We obviously, share and work with them. We're all there for the best interests of the sport. And then you've got the Northern Hemisphere aspect of it with Super League and the French competitions that I played in, which now have their own teams in the Super League. So, there's a lot of emerging nations, and Heritage Rugby League in Australia is becoming a bigger thing. We had a couple of events recently, Harmony Nines events, they're called, where cultural groups in Australia get together. There was one here in Sydney, recently. We've got one coming up in Perth soon, the Harmony Nines, which is a massive event over there, with huge participation in it. So, yeah, it's got tendrils all over the world, rugby league, and we're slowly, as in the NRL, we're slowly becoming more and more involved in the things outside of Australia as well, with trying to influence it in a good way, given the resources that we have.
And so clubs have gone through, a lot of challenges, in the last couple of years. And now there's, again, when you and I were growing up, there was, cricket in the summer and footy in the winter, and there was not as much choice. Now there's lots of choice, and there's a lot more pressures on clubs to be sustainable, have the facilities, and be able to, even things like getting access to grounds. What are some of the challenges that rugby league clubs are facing at the moment?
All of those are challenges. Like being a volunteer is an incredibly tough gig in any sport. Just the nature of society too these days, the amount of compliance there is that's often not even forced by us as a sport. The amount of government compliance and things that happen these days that volunteers have to dedicate their time for. So when it comes to volunteers, and look, we have great partnerships and state bodies too in the sport that we can't forget. So the QRL and the New South Wales Rugby League, they handle a lot of the club and competition governance aspects and the education of that and the support of that, and we support them on the side of the game development activity. We handle the coach education and things like that at the community level, so that's another aspect of where we help clubs. We run the accreditation courses. We do things called coaching updates, where we get around and get all the coaches across the latest sort of info. Club environment is just a huge aspect. You have to build a club that people want to be at. It sounds easy, but it's not. Like, you've got to have good people at your club. Your club has to be a place people are welcome at, that they want to be there. So part of our job is providing that volunteer support, the education, the resources, so their job becomes a little bit easier, so they can spend more time on building a healthy environment at their club that people want to be a part of. And some of the positive change you see in that environment, and even through to, like we said before, with the addition of ladies league tag teams and female tackle teams, local clubs are becoming it's funny, they're becoming a lot like they used to be a long time ago, where they're a real community hub where people come to spend time, or they come to watch games, or they turn up to training to just socialise. And that's a way we're conscious of moving and continuing to build upon with our sport, is that's never going to go away. People need a community. People want to be part of a community. That's one thing that's not going to change in human beings. And rugby league clubs are great communities. The support they provide you, like everyone who's involved in it would be able to rattle off a million instances where they needed help and they got it before they asked, because they were part of a rugby league club or a rugby league community. So that's really important. But there are a heap of challenges. There's barriers there's travel, there's scheduling, there's the amount of options, like you said. So again, it's about removing those barriers for people, for us, making it as easy as possible to play and volunteer in the sport. If we can do that, we hope that that enables the volunteers to then play their role the best way they can. And ultimately, it's a place we want those clubs to be a place people want to be, and then they want to come back to next year. Because as much as we talk about recruitment in my world in the sport, retention of people is equally important. That we minimise that churn rate, as we call it, of participants year to year. Because the more we start with this year from last year, we're already in front in the recruitment. We don't have to rely on the recruitment aspect as much if you're retaining a lot of your players and volunteers from last year.
And is it a part of like your remit, or also working with the state bodies, whether it be Queensland, New South Wales, to sort of provide more technology infrastructure and those kind of things to sort of make things like, registering players and recruitment and all of the admin, again, 20 years ago, someone might have been doing it on paper, or, those kind of things, and it becomes, comes a lot, is trying to provide some of that technical infrastructure for running a club to sort of make it a little bit easier. Is that sort of something you're trying to do with the states?
Yeah, we're all involved in that. So the NRL has a great system called My Sideline, which is it's a central hub for the grassroots of the sport. So that's where you register as a player. It's where you register as a coach, a volunteer, all that. All of the scheduling happens within it, all the draws, all the information you need to access, you can access through My Sideline as a participant or a volunteer, and that's connected to playrugbyleague.com, which is our major grassroots site. You've got the NRL site in itself, but off that you can go through to playrugbyleague.com. And through playrugbyleague.com, that's where you can see any program that's happening in the country, any school activity that's going on, our schoolboy cup competitions and things like that, like the elite parts of school sport and all of that. They're all in there. So it's all housed in one spot. But the My Sideline system was developed over the last few years, and that was our big step out of the older ways of doing things, where now everything is, you got your own profile, you're in control of everything through My Sideline. We also have the My League app. So the My League app is for volunteers mainly, and everything from coaching videos to their resources and everything, it's all housed in there. So we've got an extensive digital team in the NRL, and part of that team is solely dedicated to participation and improving our products and the user experience. So there's a big arm of that within even our participation group, as well as obviously the other digital parts of the NRL that are focused on the elite level of the game. We have that dedicated digital team that's focused on the grassroots experience. So we moved a long way in that as a sport, which you have to. If you don't, you'll become pretty irrelevant pretty quickly.
Well, it is. I mean, it becomes about how do you design that, customer experience, in this case, a player experience, whether it's a 6-year-old starting to play or a 16-year-old or a 35-year-old. Like, is it easy to sign up? How do I do it? I've got a busy schedule, those kind of things. And then on the other side, you've now started getting that data to know what does participation look like, what do the numbers look like in different regions, and it become a really savvy commercial asset that you can be rolling out, with partners to your grassroots. So it's a modernisation and a digitisation of the game that, multiple sports have done over the past, 10 or 15 years, that starts really opening the eyes of, that wide part of the pyramid. 20 years ago, no one had that data. They just knew there was lots of people playing. Now you can have that definitive data of who's playing, when are they playing, who's playing the most, and can get a really strong picture for you when you're trying to look at that overall picture.
Yeah, the data that's at our fingertips these days through all these systems is just amazing. Like people that I run into are shocked that, like, on the phone, on the spot, I can bring up live any club in the country. I can bring up live on my phone what their current registration numbers are, what the trends are over the last few years. I can show them graphs of everything. I can show them their retention rates. I can show them what our volunteers and referees rates and everything at sort of your fingertips. And then that makes your decision making and your sort of the way you develop your strategy and your priority areas. We can just do that so much quicker and so much more agile now, that we can find where our gaps are really quickly. We can find where opportunities are really quickly, and we can keep our staff and our volunteers, we can give them a real high level of knowledge and detail and get in front of things. So we can get in front of issues that could be happening in participation really quickly because of all the data. And that's thanks to these sort of systems. And it's also the analytical systems we use that now we can sort of future project to where there might be demand or growing demand for rugby league. And that's important in outside of the traditional states, like you mentioned before, New South Wales and Queensland. Like this past year in 2023 in Victoria, we grew as a sport participation growth of 30%, which is huge. It's like we've got more people playing sport in Victoria than we've ever had, and it was a record year of growth. And we know where all those hot spots are, but equally we know where all the opportunity areas are in Victoria to grow even further. And we do that in WA and Northern Territory and all the other places outside of the traditional states. So all that data at our fingertips, we didn't have that even 5 years ago. we didn't have that sort of insight where we can really get in front of things and put some strategy in place to take advantage of it. But again, at the end of the day, our commodity in what I do is a participant, where we try and stay really focused on what's important to us and what we do, and we try and not get too tied up into everything else, because you can go down some rabbit holes when you start to really look into that analytical sort of like data. You can really get confused and go down rabbit holes. So we try and simplify for our staff everything. I look at a lot of it and I spend a lot of time in it, and I am a bit of a geek in a jock body.
Yep.
Like I love it, but I try not to swamp other people with it. I try to simplify it, break it down, and go, I've had a look at all of this background information. This is where the opportunities are. This is what we should do. This is the approach we should take. And we really go region by region, suburb by suburb around the country. It's a very individualised approach in how we drive participation in the sport or growth or retention. We don't just have a one-fit-all approach to it.
You mentioned there, and you're obviously super passionate about game development. The NRL is going to take a couple of games to Las Vegas next year and play at Allegiant Stadium, where home of the Raiders, and it'll be home of the Super Bowl a couple of weeks earlier. Does that potentially go, hey, what does people playing rugby league in America? Is it just another piece of the puzzle for you?
Yeah, it's like it's as a sport, it's baby steps. It's like it's a toe in the water. Like you know better than I do, or probably anyone, that market and the size of it and the potential that's in it. So yeah, of course, there's a long-term dream that yes, you could access a participant base that is just enormous, and given the their most popular sport that's already there has a lot of parallels to our sport. Like you'd think there's potential in the future, but it's definitely not. We're not going in there with that front of mind at first. It's the sport's going over there to really take advantage of that huge market and get rugby league on the map. And we use our elite game, even in Australia. We use the draw of that elite game to get participation results. Like we're connected into every major rugby league event that happens, and a lot of people probably aren't aware unless they've attended those things or been to the actual activations. But everything around State of Origin and grand finals and games, NRL games that happen in the other states or out of the traditional areas, we always have game development activity heavily connected into it, and we attach to that elite draw card to try and, it's like a moth to a flame for people. So we try to utilise that and get a participation aspect to everything we do. So I'm sure, and look, there's a long-term plan for NRL games in Las Vegas. So I'm sure if everything goes well, there'll be a time where we look at, okay, how do we extend this now, and how do we go deeper into the American sort of market? Is there a potential to do it, or is there not? That decision will obviously happen with others, probably not me, but I'm guessing I would get tapped on the shoulder at some point to say, what are we going to do there? Because
it's very interesting in a lot of your focus is grassroots and, getting a young boy or girl starting to play and making sure they've got a way to potentially reach the pinnacle, the professional leagues. A lot of other sports in different guises are doing like talent identification of players in other sports and saying, well, that player type or that athlete type could work well in our sport. And, we've seen some successes, some failures in that. Is that a small part? Is that something that's under your remit? Is that something that you potentially look at, or is that more for the fishing for clubs to potentially do, to think, oh, we can convert that person?
Yeah, it's a bit like understanding probably the whole rugby league pathways and talent system is a very long conversation, and there's the NRL clubs play a huge part in that. There's definitely a transition space where we move from participant to aspirational player in the sort of 13s to 15s age group, and this is all connected to our strategy and the player development framework, where we want to, as a sport, delay that specialisation. Like we want kids to diversify at 6 to 12. It's much healthier for them to do that and not just highly specialise into one sport when they're too young. We know through the research that ultimately drives people away from sport at the end of the day if they specialise too early. It burns them out. So at around 13 to 15, there's a lot of aspirational sort of transitional areas. And we have a thing called the RISE program, which is that's the first step for a kid out of club football into I want to do something more. And the way our sport has set it up, it's very much we want that kid to step forward aspirationally and say, I want more in the sport. Where can I get it? And we provide it through the RISE program, which is individualised. It's not a representative team. It's not picking what everyone calls the best kids. It's who wants more, who wants more development, who wants more skill, who wants more physical literacy, who wants some resilience skills and some well-being and mental health skills. That's all entailed into it. And the kids go through that from 13 to 15. And then after that, the NRL pathways really kick in, and we're talking about elite programs and elite squads that go into then the pathways competitions that run across New South Wales and Queensland. So we play a role through participating into RISE. We're also involved in RISE because there's a local volunteer upskilling aspect to that as well through coaches. But it's a pretty intricate system. In rugby league, we tend to not. We did go through a period, I reckon, around the sort of 90s, early 2000s, where we looked at, that athlete more before a footballer, and we went, let's find some athletes and try and turn them into footballers. We've very much gone back to what we are in the sport in terms of that, where it's footballer first, athlete sort of second these days. But you still will have the NRL clubs who they really concentrate on the body type or the physical aspect of that player first and then look at the footballer. But as a whole, our sport is very good at focusing on the football skills first before the athlete, and then the high performance units kick in and try and get that footballer to the athletic level they need to be. So, we don't really approach it as a whole. Yeah. In general, there are places to focus on it, but in general, we approach it football first, athlete second.
But it's also like the bit that you're talking about is getting that pathway and getting those kids when they're making that decision, because you always have that, am I going to play cricket, or am I going to play footy, or am I going to play basketball, or am I going to play AFL, or am I going to play NRL, and sort of making it one attractive to them to say, I want to continue this path. We've got a path. It's the RISE program, and here's the steps you can make to play first grade, to play state of origin, to make that really clear, because it's a really big decision. Because you're right, I think again, I agree. The studies around playing multiple sports. I mean, I think when I hear Roger Federer played multiple sports till he was 13. I think the only one there's the exception to the rule is Tiger Woods, who was playing golf since he was 2. But but he was a freak. But a lot of
look, there's always the exception, and our thing we always say when we get met with that sometimes is Jonathan Thurston was always going to be Jonathan Thurston, and Andrew Johns was always going to be Andrew Johns, and they're natural freaks of their sport. They probably, without any coaching, they still would have got to the heights they got to. There's always an exception to the rule, but in general, you need to allow kids to develop in their own timeline. But we're not all the same at each age. Like the relative age effect is a huge thing. That's part of the player development framework. It's a big consideration with what we do. Like that 6-year-old kid is not the same as that 6-year-old kid. That 12-year-old kid is not the same as that 12-year-old kid. So if we all pigeonhole them and say at this exact age is when you need to choose, whatever, this is a slow transition, and it can happen between 13 to 15 to 16 to 17. It can happen older, depending on how your body matures and your mind matures. And we want kids to naturally go through that, and we don't want to pigeonhole them. So 13 to 15, we're still saying to them, hey, play a couple of sports, but you've probably just narrowed your focus a little. When you're 6 to 12, you're looking at everything's a possibility. I want to do everything. I want to try it all, sample it all, see what I like, see what skills I get out of it all, because all those skills end up benefiting the sport you choose anyway. And then at 13 to 15, you just start to zero that in a bit. Maybe it's rugby league and basketball and a bit of cricket. And now I'm 16 or 17, I'm going to go even further in and specialise even more. If you are that aspirational player, one thing we've got to always remind people is that not everyone's aspirational. Some people are just happy to play for fun. What's wrong with that?
Yep.
There is nothing wrong with that. If a kid is 15, 16, 17, we don't all have to be NRL players. They might just want to play with their mates, and that's fine. And we need a place for them, and we need to look after them as well and give them a great environment. So it all comes back to what I said before. We need people that will look after that kid and give them a place to play and give them the same opportunities to play the sport. They may not be playing it at Allegiant Stadium, but they're playing it at the level they're happy with and comfortable with. And we try and really get that right as a sport, and we're trying to move further and further and educate people more in that direction. Like, let's not push professionalism on kids. Like, let's let them get there naturally. We'll provide all the tools they need, but let's let them get there in a natural, organic way.
And also the big part of what you're trying to do is you're doing broad game development. So someone who is 22 should still be able to find somewhere to play footy, because that's vital to have that local club to be vital. It's great to have a great junior program, but you also need, hey, I'm going to go on a Saturday, I'm going to go watch my local club, because people still will want to be playing, NRL into their 30s if they're silly enough to, or into a Masters competition if they can still run around.
Yeah, Masters or touch footy or tag, whatever. Yeah, exactly. And, like, we sort of have this expectation that every teenage kid that plays rugby league wants to be an NRL player. Like, not all of them want to. They love the sport, but there's rugby league and there's the NRL.
Yep.
Like, even though we are, the big governing body of the sport and the elite level competition, it is a participation sport at the end of the day as well, with like we've discussed, many aspects and many different forms. That's okay. If someone wants to play at the level they're comfortable at, there should be a place for them to play. And we really try and address that at every age group. But there should be a place that you play at that is the right level of competition for you.
Terrific, Dean. Before we wrap up, I want to get to the Sports Geek Closing 5. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended? Was it at Brookie Oval, perhaps?
That's the earliest one I remember. I'm sure I was probably taken to other things at an earlier age, but my first vivid memories are definitely Brookvale Oval. In the
home of the Sea Eagles, for the people who are listening and not know.
Home of the Manly Sea Eagles. In the era of Cliffy Lyons was like sort of my idol. For the footy tragics that remember the 1987 grand final, Manly beat Canberra. I was 7 at that point. So that was when I idolised those sort of guys, and that's the early memory I have of Brookie Oval. And again, like, such good memories, a suburban ground, the hill, the old, not even a tunnel to run out in. They just used to drag a cage across, and the players would run through that. So you'd be walking along the concourse, and then they drag a cage across, and the players run out. Like, great memories of Brookie Oval, and that's my earliest sporting event memory.
Terrific. You would have been to a few sports events in your time, both here and in Europe. Do you have a favourite food memory or a go-to food when you're at a footy event or a sports event?
I'm not a big eater at sporting events, to be honest. Like, I never really have been, but you can't, it's like, I'm Australian, so you can't go past the pie or a sausage roll. Like, I'm not a hot dog. If given the choice, it would be pie or sausage roll for me, not the hot dog sort of route. But I think the biggest difference for me now, going to modern sporting events, is the actual choice you've got. Like, we didn't have a choice when we were young. You walk up to the food things, they were glorified canteens back in my childhood, and it was like, mate, you can get a Coke and a pie, and that's about it.
No, plenty of gourmet options available now in stadiums around the world. But the humble pie still normally is top of the charts when I ask.
I'd probably go that.
Yeah. What's the first app you open in the morning?
App? Pretty boring. Apple News, I'd say. I like to just know first thing in the morning just what's going on in the world, broadly speaking. I don't spend much time on it. Just broadly speaking, like, what's going on in the world. And we not an app, but we have a daily briefing feed of the Australian media. So I like to get my head around what's what people are talking about our sport and other sports. Every morning I go really through that with a fine-tooth comb. I actually really like to start my day just absorbing information that is out there and that's happening and is right now. I don't feel comfortable when I don't do that, and I'm not sure why that is. Like, if I don't start a day like that, I don't have a good day generally.
That's fair enough. Keep your finger on the pulse is fair enough. Is there someone that you follow? It might be someone on social media or an author that you follow that you suggest the podcast listeners should give a follow to?
Look, social media, I'm not really a huge social media person. I understand its importance. Like, every time I say that, people try and, tell me how important. I understand it. Like, I'm not technologically illiterate. I get it. And I get the strength and the power of it. But for me, personally, I don't engage in it too much.
Yep.
LinkedIn I enjoy because it's got just a lot more relevant content for me, because I'm looking at what's going on in the sporting world, and so that's my main social media go-to is LinkedIn. I don't really engage in Instagram, Facebook, or the others.
And is there someone in particular that you follow or look up to, or is there someone doing great things in game development that you look towards?
Probably not in the game development world, like, per se, that I look at particularly, but I really like to look at what's going on in every different sport around the world as much as I can. So it's more than there's a particular person I follow. Like, I've got my own role models from within our sport, and people that have really taught me a lot over the years. A lot of them are coaches and a few of them are administrators. But I really love seeing what sports are doing and what is going on in the world, and especially the ones that are innovative. And like I'm a big fan of the NBA. I always have been. Again, I liked basketball when I was young, playing it.
Yep.
So they're my two sports, really, rugby league and basketball. And I love the NBA. I follow it religiously, but I love how their approach is they're a trendsetter. They're not a follower. They do what they do, and sometimes they probably get it wrong in people's eyes, but I love that aspect of the NBA, that they seem to me that they're confident in themselves, who they are. They set the trends, and a lot of people copy them.
Yep.
So they're onto something really good, because a lot of people try and copy them, but they can't do it like they do. So yeah, I'm a big admirer of the NBA, and probably my all-time up on a pedestal person is Phil Jackson. Like, as a person, I just admire in general, just who he is and how he approached things, and the egos he handled and the way he conducts himself is like he's always been my big shining star. If that's an exceptional operator and an exceptional person, as far as I can tell. Obviously, don't know Phil Jackson, but as far as I can tell, love him.
Terrific. I mean, it is a really great point. I mean, I spoke about it when I had Stacey McGrainer on the podcast. She's always looking at sports from a customer experience point of view. So when she goes to a stadium, she's looking at signage and what's happening, or we're at an NBA playoff game and we're discussing what's on the big screen and the signage and the commercial stuff.
Yeah.
Are you very much the same? Yes, you follow the NBA and you watch 100%. What they do, but then you're like, oh, what's NBA Junior doing? Oh, what's that program doing? How are they implementing that? And so you're very much, that's sort of how you tackle your LinkedIn?
For sure. NBA Cares, all of that. I love to see their community work. I think they do great. They publicise very well what they do. They get the message out there. That's one thing as a sport I think we've got to up our game in the NRL, is actually showing people what we do, because we do so many good things that people don't know about. So we need to learn how to promote what we do better. Places like the NBA and that do it really well. American sports in general do it really well, but we need to get better at that. But I'm always trying. I think healthy competition is great. There's a world where we can all coexist. It doesn't have to be let's beat all the other sports down and we're the last one standing. There's enough in the world for everyone. I think looking at it like that and admiring other sports when they do well is healthy. But I'm always big in our world of what we can try in game development. Let's just not try and copy people. Let's try and innovate and make what works for us work, and let's try and be that trendsetter, like I talked about with the NBA. Let's try and be that in our world. Let's not just follow what others do. Let's innovate and be creative. But yeah, I'm always I love just absorbing as much info as I can.
What is the best place? And you might have spoiled it, which is fine. What's the best place for people to connect with you, whether they work in game development in sports around the world? What's the best place for them to connect with you?
Oh, probably on LinkedIn, because it's probably the only place you'll
that is exactly the correct answer. Not that there is an incorrect answer, but that is where you can connect with different people and find out what's happening in cricket development in England, or rugby or basketball in different 100%. Parts of the world. So
yeah, and that's why I like it. That's why it's a social media thing I actually engage in. And to be honest, I don't even really look at it as social media the way I look at LinkedIn. It's a network of like-minded sort of people, and I like being around sports-minded people. But I like also my life isn't just about sport. I love music. I love reading. I love films. I like to just engage in that whole world of how people create things in general. And I think that you can learn lessons from all of that. But yeah, probably LinkedIn, anything like that. But also, I'm happy for anyone to just email me and things like that, which is just D for Dean Bosnich at nrl.com.au. And that's the easiest way to contact me.
Well, thank you very much, Dean. Thank you very much for taking your time. Like I said, I love when I chat with guests that have as much passion about their job and their sport that you do, and that you actually exude it in the interview. So looking forward to seeing the game of NRL rugby league, grow under your watch. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
No, thanks, Sean. Appreciate it. It's been great to chat.
Learn from the Sports Geek Amplify Season 2 cohort. Trajectory, Xtonet, SeatGeek, Sponsor CX, and Stats Perform. For more, go to sportsgeekamplify.com.
Thanks again to Dean Bosnich. You can connect with him and other like-minded sports and game development execs. That's who he wants to connect with. You can connect with him. The link to his LinkedIn will be in the show notes. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/352 to find that. I love it when podcast listeners connect with guests, but also say, thank you, I really appreciate that episode. I love getting that feedback back from guests. So if you can thank Dean for the episode when you are reaching out, I do appreciate it. Before I wrap up, I have got a question. Would you attend a live podcast show? It is a bit of a trend with a few different podcasts that are doing live events and live interviews on stage. For those of you who've met me and seen me at a conference or engaged at a conference, I love the live environment. I love getting up on stage. It's why I did stand up a few years ago, and lucky enough to do a set at the comedy festival here in Melbourne. I really do enjoy that backwards and forwards, and I guess the element that live can bring. Did it at Seat with David Michael. Did that interview at Seat. Happy to do some live shows. So I'm considering sort of setting myself up in 2024 potentially to do some live shows in different parts of the world where I am. And so, so whether that be partnering with the conference and sort of doing a live show as a side gig of a conference, or integrated as part of the conference, or standalone when I'm doing some travel. So one, I'd love your feedback on the idea. Is it something you would attend? Is it something you would like? Perhaps even it's something you might want me to host a live event live podcast at your event, maybe interviewing your CEO at a pre-game function, those kind of things. Happy to explore what that looks like. Get in touch. I'd love to do some more live events and connect with people and add some more travel to my 2024 schedule. So if you're interested, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, or just send me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm still sort of using Twitter. I'd love to get your feedback on the concept. As always, if you need help across digital, ticketing, marketing, commercial, fan development, they are all connected, right? They are all connected, or they should be. If they're a little bit disconnected, maybe it is a good time to give me a call. You can reach me via all the usual channels, socials, email, sportsgeekhq.com website. Looking forward to hear from you. I love working with podcast listeners. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Looking to help your digital or sponsorship team? Book in for a Pick My Brain session with Sean Callanan to help your team level up. Book now at sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.